This show was here for me at my literal lowest point, and I'm gonna miss it. The day has finally arrived. After 7 years, 6 seasons, 179 episodes, and some other goodies that we'll talk about, Craig of the Creek has come to an end, officially bringing the 2010s era of Cartoon Network Studios to a close alongside it, which is insane to think about. And yeah, okay, we're getting more Adventure Time and we're getting more regular show, but those are considered different series. And Gumball's made in the UK, that was never made at CNS. I've talked about Craig of the Creek on this channel plenty of times, hyped it up before it even aired, covered some of the deepest lore from the first 3 seasons. And although it's been a couple years since I made a video on it, I never stopped keeping tabs on it and I never stopped loving it. Now that it's over, not only do I want to talk about its heartfelt ending, but I also want to talk about the impact the show has had on so many people of all ages and how it got me through one of the darkest times of my life. I want to shed light on why Craig the Creek was special and why it'll be one of the most fondly remembered Cartoon Network shows of all time. Also, please subscribe to stay in the loop of all things animation and check out Roundtable Rewind for compilations of our greatest hits that are perfect to throw on while you sleep, study, or draw. Thank you. Before we dig into the spectacular final season of the show, we gotta talk about the generational run this show had. Despite Cartoon Network effectively canceling it, Craig of the Creek managed to accomplish so much with its near decade on the airwaves. For starters, the show effectively has 2 endings. It was clear back in the day that they weren't sure if they were gonna make it past season 3, so they decided to wrap up the big story arc surrounding the other side of the creek, the Green Poncho, and King Xavier. You know, the side of the show that really made you feel like this was Kids Next Door mixed with Ed, Edd, and Eddy. I still love that they put that comparison in the show, by the way.
Do you guys remember Ed, Edd, and Eddy?
They wrapped this up not just with another half-hour episode, but with a 5-part event, 4 11-minute episodes, and 1 big half-hour season finale. Although the stakes in these episodes aren't the craziest thing you'll ever see on television, the skill of it all is something that a lot of shows would kill to have. So many characters and plot threads converge into this all-out war as the 2 sides of the creek engage in a game of capture the flag, putting everything on the line to stop Xavier's takeover of this place that is near and dear to the hearts of our protagonist. The 3rd act of this finale is, without exaggeration, one of the greatest things to ever air on Cartoon Network. In terms of scope, this is a more grounded version of how I thought Steven Universe would end back in the day. And again, you could tell that the crew was very unsure there would be another season, because there's a strong sense of finality to the conclusion. Craig is about to be crowned the new King of the Creek, only to say screw that, there shouldn't be a king. Kids should just be allowed to play however they want without someone like Xavier telling them what to do. It's a fantastic ending to not just this story arc, but the show itself. And yet, they keep it trucking for 3 more years, with seasons 4, 5, and 6. Although 6 was originally just the second half of season 5. These seasons not only gave us more shenanigans around the creek, but also a new story arc centered around Craig and friends trying to locate the heart of the forest. Although the real focus of it is the redemption of Xavier as he's left with no friends and becomes the Red Poncho, accumulating in a finale where he teams up and reconciles with Maya and Omar. Also, Bernard and Kenneth get some time to shine, which is really nice to see. We also got the tragically short-lived spin-off, Jessica's Big Little World, which was the first and only CNS original for Cartoonito, their bizarre preschool block. I never gave the show a whirl because I'm a grown man, and unless it's something nostalgic, TVY7 is the lowest age rating I'm willing to watch, but it looked absolutely gorgeous. I love how the art direction was able to separate itself from the main series. But yeah, I think the big guys realized that investing into a preschool block on cable was just burning money. It's the 2020s, everything's on streaming. So they cut their losses and wrapped it up after season 1. Still, the fact they had enough confidence in Craig the Creek as a brand to give it a spin-off is pretty crazy, because no other Cartoon Network show in the 2010s got a spin-off while it was running. That was something that stopped happening back in the early 2000s with Evil Con Carne. And although it only got 1 season, I take solace in knowing that there's probably a little kid out there who connected with Jessica's Big Little World more than any other preschool show. More than the demon known as Cocomelon, or even the cream of the crop preschool programming like Bluey. So it was all worth it in the end. But Craig didn't just get 6 seasons in a spin-off, no. It got something community fans are still waiting for to this very day. 6 seasons, a spin-off, and a movie. The end of 2023 gave us the incredible TV movie Craig Before the Creek, an origin story that gives us a look at a Craig who just moved to Hercleton. We get to see how he, Kelsey, and JP became a trio as they get roped into this epic pirate adventure that's also a musical. And damn it, the songs slap! The animation is so good throughout the film. There isn't just one moment where it pops off. It consistently delivers some of the best looking visuals we've ever gotten from this franchise. From Cartoon Network as a whole, it's relentlessly funny, and in classic Craig the Creek fashion, it knows how to pull on the heartstrings without being a downer. If you haven't seen the movie, change that now. You don't need to be caught up with the show on account of it being an origin story, and I doubt we're going to see another non-Adventure Time movie from Cartoon Network anytime soon. It's also been nominated for many awards over the years, and although it only won one of them, it still goes to show that people recognize the many great things it accomplished over its 7 years on air, which is what I wanted to do with this section. We've talked about so many cancellations throughout the years where shows are cut way too soon. They didn't get to recognize their potential. We don't really get shows like Craig all too often where, yeah, it got canned, but they pretty much left no stone unturned. Hell, Adventure Time wrapped up prematurely, and we still have them telling new stories through Fiona and Cake and side quests just to get it all out there. Craig did their big epic story and then got to expand on it without putting themselves in a corner. The show never lost momentum or experienced seasonal rot. The show got a huge victory lap and is leaving behind a beautiful legacy. This brings us to the final season of the series, a stretch of episodes that make for a really effective send-off. The first 6 episodes are a part of this little sleepover arc where Craig's dealing with a bee infestation, so he crashes at the homes of various kids, giving us one last hurrah with a lot of the side cast as Craig spends time with their families. It's wholesome stuff! Where the farewell season really shines, however, is with its last 4 episodes: The Elders of the Creek, JP's Bucket List, The Little Warrior, and See You Tomorrow at the Creek. Now, if you know what creators Matt Burnett and Ben Levin were up to before Craig of the Creek, hell, before Steven Universe even, then you shouldn't be surprised that one of the last episodes is dedicated to the Elders, because they existed before either of these cartoons did. In fact, the Elders are the reason Craig of the Creek even exists. To quote Ben's post over on Instagram, the first thing Matt Burnett and I ever collaborated on was a short about 3 nerds LARPing as the wise men in a nativity play. We animated the whole thing on paper, voicing the characters along with our friends in a makeshift booth in my apartment, and then we put it up on YouTube. The algorithm was different back in 2007, and surprisingly, it got a decent amount of attention. So we continued on, making a little web series about the 3 nerds, Mark, Barry, and David. One thing led to another, and eventually, we had the chance to pitch it as a show. There were no takers. Maybe the concept of college kids playing make-believe was confusing. However, the pilot script we wrote did land us our first writing job. Years later, Matt and I were writing on Steven Universe and had the opportunity to pitch to Cartoon Network. We thought about what we love to do, and the web series came to mind. It made us think, instead of doing a show about 3 college students playing pretend, what if we made one about 3 kids playing pretend in the woods, like how we did when we were kids? That was the beginning of Craig of the Creek, and as a nod to our old web series, we put Mark, Barry, and David in the show as the Elders of the Creek. Many folks have written and shaped the Elders over the course of the show, but Ashley and Leanna have a real fondness for these misfit weebs. Together, Ashley and Leanna made some delightfully unhinged episodes about the Elders, so it was no question who should wrap up their arc. I love this episode, and I'm glad they were the ones to give the Elders their final send-off. The episode itself is a banger. When we last saw the Elders, they broke up. They also have their childhood wonder, but their leader, Elder Mark, takes it a step too far. Because he's a man-child who doesn't want to grow up and wants to hold back the people around him from growing, harboring a grudge towards Kenneth because bro went to college and made new friends and has hobbies beyond anime and LARPing.
You've changed, man.
It's been 10 years. Haven't you changed too?
This grudge ended up getting in the way of not only Craig's journey to find the heart of the forest, but Barry and David's chance to attend a party. A taste of college life, socializing with people their own age. It all went down the drain because of Mark's own insecurities. And so, they ditch him. And that was back in season 4. Fast forward to season 6, and now their old spot, Elder Rock, has been taken over by the absolute freak known as Jerry. Once taken in by Mark and dubbed as a new elder, Jerry went mad with power, stealing everyone's toys and usurping Mark. Mark, in an act of desperation, begs Craig, Kelsey, and JP to reunite the elders in order to get Jerry out of here. And this allows us to see how Barry and David have spread their wings since parting ways with Mark. Barry's grown out his hair and has a girlfriend, Melody, who truly adores him for who he— Oh my god, they mentioned Megas XLR!
Do you remember that show, Megas XLR?
I just wish they didn't cancel it so soon.
I hope they never break up, bro. David's been taken in by the witches and is trying to be the best goth he could be, although his music isn't hitting the way he wants it to.
I hate it.
The kids are successful in assembling the elders for one last Ava reference. David and Barry LARP with Kenneth to take Jerry down, but when they realize they have to put up with Mark, they have no qualms with calling it quits. This leads to Mark finally sharing a moment of vulnerability and introspection, acknowledging that he's been insecure and scared of the future, becoming a selfish and jealous person that pushed everyone away. He was scared of change, but trying to keep things the same only made his life worse.
Maybe we could put the past aside for a moment, so I could fix at least one thing I've messed up, and get these kids' toys back.
The elders reconcile and decide to pass off Elder Rot to the new generation, no longer gatekeeping it as a place for them to hang out. It's transformed into the Creek's equivalent of a library or a comic shop. Kids are playing card games, reading manga, and renting stuff like video games. Mark, Barry, David, and Kenneth are all hanging out again just like the good old days, but instead of doing the same things they did as kids, they're going to a concert near Kenneth's college. It's a really sweet ending to the characters who played a huge role in making Craig the Creek what it is. Next we have JP's bucket list, which Ben Levin describes as a speedrun of all things JP. The crew really wanted to focus on the joy that JP brought to them and the audience alike, so they devised a story where JP comes up with a list of things to do that he keeps in a bucket, hence bucket list. And while I don't really have much to say about this episode, it really is just rapid fire JP shenanigans that are as charming and hilarious as ever. The ending did put a huge smile on my face. JP's upset he finished his bucket list, so Craig and Kelsey help him come up with a new one. It's a simple yet effective way to remind the audience that even though the show is ending, these characters will continue to have adventures in this world. It probably doesn't come as a shock that Kelsey's send-off, The Little Warrior, is the most emotional episode of the bunch. I think it beats out the emotional impact of the finale just by a hair. The series made it known back in the first season that Kelsey's mom had passed away, but this episode follows up on it in a very powerful way. Trying to figure out what to wear for picture day, Kelsey turns to her mother for advice by reading a book that was written by her, tailor-made for Kelsey. And surprise, surprise, it's a fantasy adventure novel. This recontextualizes everything we know about her. Why she has such a love for adventure, her whole D&D persona, and why she wants to be an author herself. Through this book, we discover that Kelsey's mom was terminally ill when Kelsey was a lot younger. It seems like throughout all of Kelsey's super early childhood, her mom knew their time together would be short, and she did her best to prepare Kelsey for the real world, propping her up as a powerful warrior who'd be able to make the right decisions so long as she believes in herself. Dude, my heart! To once again quote Ben Levin, as a nod to Kelsey's mother being a writer, the role of Grace was played by Shauna McGarry, who was the story editor on the first season of the show and helped usher this character into the world. I named the character after the author Grace Chetwin, who wrote one of my favorite fantasy series. When I was a kid, my buddy Clark and I used to pretend play like we were in Gome on Windy Mountain, which is part of the inspiration for Kelsey's own self-narrative play. I couldn't think of a better character to reinforce the importance of being yourself and following your heart than Kelsey. Embracing change, living in the moment, staying true to yourself, these are all consistent themes in Craig of the Creek that have been present since the first season, and it made me wonder what theme the final episode would tackle, as we presumably bring the focus back to Craig. And as soon as we got to the meat of the finale, it was apparent that they chose what's arguably the most important theme of the series, one that ties back to Craig in a pretty obvious way. The final episode is about the Creek. It's about connections. It's about community. Something that we should be focusing on now more than ever. See You Tomorrow at the Creek starts with Bernard going off to college. Something that low-key feels like a transition to another spin-off if they ever wanted to continue the franchise, but have it age with the audience. I'd definitely watch a young adult Bernard-focused spin-off starring him, Alexis, and the elders on a college campus, and I think it'd fit right in with the likes of Fiona and Cake. Teens and adults still love animation, and it seems like we're finally heading in a direction where we could get more cartoons aimed directly at older teens and 20-somethings, so I'm glad they left the door open to explore that path. But back to the finale at hand. After sacrificing his old map to the heart of the forest, Craig finishes up a new one, and instead of keeping it to himself, now knowing the creek like the back of his hand, he decides to put it up next to the trading tree so that all the kids in the creek can use it. This actually hit me in the feels a bit, because Craig's map has been integral to every story arc in the series. It is to Craig of the Creek what the journals are to Gravity Falls. So for Craig to now share this piece of himself with everyone, even total strangers, for the sole purpose of helping them, it's just sweet, man. This entire final season is just bringing things full circle in the most wholesome way possible. Because the map is accessible to everyone, the kids of the creek now know exactly where to find the trio.
Dang it, we doxed ourselves!
With the scratchless one from the very first episode being the first to visit. Long story short, the trio throws a party at their spot with characters from throughout the series mingling and thanking Craig for bringing them all together. Craig gets his props for all the bonds that were formed throughout the 6 seasons, and some of the praise definitely feels like the crew patting themselves on the back, but you know what? They absolutely deserve it.
You really got a way of making kids feel like they belong.
Eventually Xavier comes through, and for a brief moment you think he might be back on his bullshit, but he really just wanted a selfie with Craig and the rest of the Creek kids. Don't cry. Don't cry. Just gotta hold it in. After the party is over, Craig, Kelsey, and JP decide to stay behind for a little bit, even after hearing the dinner horn, for the sole purpose of just taking it all in, giving us a shot that lingers for a bit more than you would expect, because just like Craig, the show wants to stay around for just a little longer.
I'll see you tomorrow.
It's a straightforward, low-key finale that just takes a moment to appreciate all the crazy adventures they embarked on, and sometimes, that's all you really need. I'm going to really miss Craig of the Creek. Even if I didn't stay on top of every single episode as it came out, it was great just knowing we had a show like this around. Craig of the Creek was important to have around because it encouraged kids to get out and play, and not just be glued to their phones. And that kind of message is necessary to have in the age of the iPad, baby. Despite incorporating pop culture, smartphones, and other things that are contributing to all of our attention spans getting absolutely obliterated, Craig of the Creek still championed using your imagination and spending as much time as possible outside. This show premiered in my 20s, and it still inspired me to get off my ass and enjoy the outdoors again. I don't think I would have found a love for hiking and getting in 10K steps a day while blasting anime OPs if Craig of the Creek didn't remind me of how cool it was to just be out in nature with your friends. I can only imagine the impact it had on the target demographic. The show managed to perfectly capture not only the culture of the late 2010s, but it captured the evergreen experience of childhood. Things like hanging at the laundromat with your cousin, feeling to turn down someone who likes you but you don't feel the same way and then you have to break things off. Getting a bad haircut and having to lurk in the shadows like you're Quasimodo. These are the things you're most likely to deal with for the first time when you're a kid. And Craig knew how to tackle all these experiences in a way that was not only really funny, but really refreshing. Not to mention, as someone who grew up as a suburban black boy, I saw so much of myself in Craig. To harken back to that laundromat episode, Craig gets roasted for how he speaks, and it reminds me of so many interactions I had with my family growing up, although it was always in jest. Still, I know I'm not the only black dude out there who resonates with Craig as a character, and I can only imagine how many black kids like him got to see him on the TV and just immediately click with him.
This shit means something to me, man.
Representation in general is something Craig the Creek excelled at, showing how people from different walks of life are all doing their own thing and just want a vibe. Which, by the way, don't let anyone ever tell you the representation doesn't matter. There was a video going viral not too long ago of this sweet little girl who was drawn to a plush of Todoroki from My Hero Academia because his design was identical to her birthmark. Not only did the creator of My Hero see this, but he told the voice actor for Todoroki about it, with the voice actor sharing on social media that there was a heroic side to this that only Todoroki could pull off. People, and especially kids, seeing themselves in media goes such a long way in getting them through the day-to-day of life, especially when there's a lot of hatred out there in the world. It helps give them a sense of belonging, and despite the usual talking points you'll see online, I think most stories known for the representation tend to do a great job of it, while still prioritizing a good story. The fact that show's officially over with at this current point in time is honestly kinda eerie. It reminds me of how Steven Universe Future wrapped up as soon as lockdown began, and society's been irreparably damaged ever since. But I hope the kids who felt empowered by it don't lose their shine, no matter how tough life gets. And on that note, as I said in the intro, this show was truly here for me at my lowest. I talked about it once before on here, but in the beginning of 2022, my partner at the time, Emily, suddenly passed away, and I was effectively dead inside. My body was moving on autopilot. I didn't want to do anything. I could barely even watch TV. And the first show I managed to actually watch and not feel completely terrible while doing so was Craig the Creek. Season 4 was just starting up, and I binged the first few episodes, and they gave me something to look forward to. It didn't pull me out of my rut, but it kept me present, and I'll always thank the show for that, for being there for me during a time in my life where I was just ready to check out entirely. So if anyone who worked on this show is watching and made it this far, thank you. You really have no idea how much you helped me and countless other people. I know people who got into the show when they were an adult because it was just cozy and it reminded them of a simpler time. I know people who watch the show with their kids but are genuinely invested in the characters. You guys made something that will continue to be important to a lot of people. And no matter how tough things get from here on out, I really hope you never forget that. It might be the end of an era, being the last 2010s show from Cartoon Network Studios and all, the last CN original to have cable premieres without moving to Adult Swim, but even so, I can't wait to see what the crew does next. As always, I want to know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on Craig of the Creek and the show as a whole? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at AwestruckThoughts and at Roundtable Vids. If you enjoyed this video, please sort of like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace.